Welcome to this introductory video on the post-colonial perspective of critical theory. We will go through each one of these three subsections of post-colonial studies: historical, new historicism, and cultural studies. Hopefully, by the end of this video, you will have a better understanding of these topics and what it means to analyze a piece of literature or writing using the post-colonial critical theory.
The Things They Carried is a collection of related fictional short stories all dealing with soldiers' experiences in the Vietnam War. The author, Tim O'Brien himself, fought in the war and created many of the stories from actual events in his tour of duty. The majority of the book spans from when he was drafted to when he left the war. When trying to understand a literary work, some critical theorists thought it would be only logical to try to understand the author first. The historical perspective analyzes the ways in which the author's life experiences affect their work. Looking at the things they carried with this perspective, one would obviously first note that the author, Tim O'Brien, was drafted into the infantry and fought in the Vietnam War. Many of the acquaintances and experiences of the main character, also named Tim O'Brien, bear striking resemblances to the author's own. You would begin to come to the conclusion that because of O'Brien's experiences, he decided to write the book in order to illustrate the horrors of war that he saw, so that readers could better understand how a veteran's time in combat shapes who they are. Someone analyzing from this perspective would also start to wonder how many of the stories in the book are actual experiences that O'Brien had. To answer this, they would probably focus on the chapter, How to Tell a True War Story. In it, O'Brien explains that a true war story isn't necessarily one in which all the details actually occurred, but one that can capture the actual effect the events had. Because of this, the reader could conclude that it does not matter how many stories in the book come directly from O'Brien's memory, as they are all in their own ways true war stories.
New historicism. History cannot be objective. Rather, there will always be a certain amount of subjectivity in any account. New historicism is that, quote, history itself becomes textual, meaning the work should be analyzed based on the time and cultural context of when it was written. New historicists believe historical events cannot be clearly defined, and rather it is our interpretation that leads to our understanding. Instead of focusing on a specific event that may have shaped how the text or work was written, new historicists focus on the ideologies and aspects of the culture as seen through the music or books or children's stories of that time period. In a way, new historicists are the archaeologists of literature. Analyzing the things they carried, new historicists would look beyond just the war and look at the whole time period itself. To the Vietnam natives, the war represented a time of great political and social chaos, and to Americans, it led to a massive anti-war movement and became a decisive and highly emotional political issue. This could have been one cause of Tim O'Brien's apprehension and undesire to serve his country in the beginning of The Things They Carried. A new historicist would look and use the cultural setting to pick apart the actions of the character. A new historicist would also perhaps look at accounts from Vietnam natives and cultural staples such as stories or literature to better understand the story and the author. Postcolonial. Postcolonialism is, by simple definition, interpreting any work of literature in terms of the conflict between colonial or imperial powers and the native society. Importantly, postcolonial looks at the big groups of people involved. It addresses how the groups view each other and what effects occurred due to their status as conquerors or the defeated. Obviously, this theory speaks of relations between European countries and their colonies. The essential question that postcolonial criticals ask is, which group is the colonizer and which group is the colonized? And what are the effects of this relationship? In The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, postcolonial critics would look at the relations between the Vietnamese people and the American military and what the effects are. Those who would dig deep would probably consider the French to be a colonizer as well, so these great critics would try to go back to the relationship between the French colonizers and the Vietnamese natives.